My name is Michael Sládek. I'm a filmmaker based in Brooklyn, as well as a New York consultant for SAGindie, which is an organization that helps bridge the gap between independent filmmakers and union actors. Welcome to our third SAGindie panel, working through indie filmmaking in the age of COVID-19. I'm joined today by a very experienced group of film professionals who've all recently shot pictures under industry COVID mitigation guidelines. We're here to discuss their experiences in the trenches. And just so I can introduce everyone here, so we'll start with actor Amy Hargreaves, is a series regular on Netflix's hit series 13 Reasons Why, and was a regular on 8 seasons of Showtime's hit series Homeland. Additional notable works include Jeremy Saulnier's Blue Ruin, Tony Gilroy's Michael Clayton, Steve McQueen's Shame, Tom DeSillo's Delirious, as well as Against the Current, El Camino, and the 1990s cult classic Brain Scan.
Oh, nice.
We'll have our heads shaved on the side.
That's a deep cut. That's a deep cut. I like it.
Yeah. Next up, producer Laura Ivey's recent productions include the upcoming Broadway musical Mrs. Doubtfire and the feature Walking Out. She produced Meg Ryan's directorial debut Ithaca, the musical adaptation of Tony Award winner The Last 5 Years, and shepherded the film The Spectacular Now, starring Shailene Woodley and Miles Teller. She's on the board of directors for Film North and Maestra Music, and served as co-president of the board of Outfest LA. Next up, director, producer, screenwriter John Keeyes most recently directed the action movie Red 48. His extensive directing and or producing credits include Living and Dying for HBO, Fall Down Dead for Warner Brothers, Becky starring Kevin James and Lulu Wilson, Separation starring Robert Friend and Brian Cox, Crypto starring Kurt Russell and Luke Hemsworth, and the forthcoming Panama starring Mel Gibson and Cole Hauser. Next up is DJ, director, screenwriter, producer, and author Dan Mirvish, who's currently making his new feature 18 and a Half. His other features are Bernard and Huey, Between Us, Omaha the Movie, and Open House. He co-founded the Slam Dance Film Festival and is the author of the books The Cheerful Subversive's Guide to Independent Filmmaking and the novel I Am Martin Eisenstadt. So we'll see how cheerful Dan is. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Hold it up again. Wait, I didn't see it. Hold it up again. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So why don't we just start out? Let's go around and start maybe in the same order that I read your names, just for the heck of it. Starting maybe with Amy. Where are you speaking to us from? And maybe you just tell us a quick overview of the work that you've done in the past few months, pretty much since COVID hit in, I guess, March. What productions you have or have been on, and just tell us a bit about them, what they are, who you're working with, and what the story subjects.
Sure. So I'm speaking to you from the middle of Missouri. I'm in a town called Forrestal. We are shooting an ultra low budget, dirty little crime thriller on it at a farm. There's basically like 2 or 3 locations. And the writer-director is Jason Milner, and the producers are Michael Kennedy and Irina Gorovaya. And we're, I think, on day, what's today, Thursday? We're on day 14 of 15. I've only been here for the last 5 days, but it's a 15-day shoot, super tight, and it's going really well. It's going really well. And then the other project I was able to work on during the pandemic, or over the last few months, is I did a feature in Columbus, Ohio, from the end of July to the beginning of September. We were there for 5 weeks. That's called They, Them, Us, and that was, I think, modified low. And that's a romantic comedy about kind of 2 blended families, kind of a very modern Brady Bunch with several twists. And the writer-director is John Sherman. He wrote it also with Melissa Hogley Woods, and Garrett Bates is the producer on that. And honestly, I was really, I was apprehensive, to go to Columbus from New York. I'd been in New York for the lockdown and everything, and it was scary to leave and go someplace where the numbers were coming up. But our producers were meticulous about following the SAG protocols, and we had testing 3 times a week, testing, masking, all the rules that we're following now. And we got through 5 weeks without a single positive test, and we were pinching ourselves at the end, but it showed me that it can be done. So yeah, so lucky me that I've been able to, I'm on my second feature during the pandemic, and just happy to be here trying to stay creative.
All right, cool. Laura, you want to jump in and tell us what you've been on?
Sure. Well, I am currently in Manhattan. I'm here for a little bit of post work on the film that I shot, that I was producer on, that we shot in August to September in upstate New York, northern Minnesota. We shot coming of age, lovely, heartwarming story of a young robotic prodigy who gets rejected from a lab and school he wants to go to, so he goes on a mission to find the professor to plead his case, obviously. We shot for 19 days, and it was a low budget, and we also did all the protocols and were very successful and did not have one positive case as well.
All right, cool. And then John?
And I'm at home in Colorado right now. Same thing. We just did Red 48 in August and September in New Jersey. It was an action movie with John Malkovich and Tyrese Gibson about a congressman and a bunch of employees in a department store that get taken hostage, and it becomes sort of a Die Hard in a Walmart. So we did that. We did that in September. I work with Yale Productions. I direct and produce for them. So we did that one, 4 weeks of prep, 3 weeks of production, 15 days, like Amy was saying, and tight and fast, but same thing. It was remarkable to see everybody from the cast through the crew, how seriously everybody took the COVID protocols. Same thing again. We didn't have any positive cases, which was fantastic. And then we're actually getting ready to start prep on 2 more movies. I actually head back to the East Coast in 2 weeks to start prepping another action movie that we're going to be filming there that I'm directing. And then we're also prepping another action movie that we're shooting in Puerto Rico. So prep and production will be simultaneous in November and December between East Coast and Puerto Rico. But same thing again, we're right now, obviously on these other 2 movies, everything right now is about COVID protocols, making sure everybody knows what's going on. We take the protocols seriously. And I think, like everybody here would agree, people want to work and people want to stay safe. And so, implementing and sticking to them, at least for us, has been pretty easy.
Cool. All right, Dan?
Yeah, hi. So I also just finished a 15-day shoot. That seems to be the magic. But ours was, we were starting to shoot in March. We shot 11 days in early March in, where was it? Greenport, New York, which is on the far northeastern tip of Long Island. And then we had to take a pandemic pause, or a healthy hiatus. So I spent 6 months in lockdown just editing the 80% of the footage we had, and doing some of the voiceover work that we needed to do, and doing working with music already, like doing as much post-production as you can do with a 3/4 finished film. And then in September, window opportunity opened up with the location, cast and crew. And so we went back and shot our last 4 days in mid-September. And thanks to Michael, we were able to work with SAG and got all the protocols figured out. We only had to do 2 rounds of testing because it was such a short shoot, partially in New York City, because most of the cast and crew were coming from there, and then partially with the local hospital out in Greenport. And yeah, like you guys, everyone came back negative, yay. And 14 days out, everyone still was fine. So that was the most important thing, was to do it safely and get it in the can.
Cool, great. So with all of these projects, let's talk a bit about preparing for them. And did the preparing for COVID mitigation, did it change the project? Did it change, in terms of budget, shoot days, crew size, even script? Did you go into these things, thinking we have to do things differently?
I see Lisa shaking her head. Me too. Lisa, you want to go first?
Oh, meet Laura?
Laura,
Laura, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, no problem. Oh yeah, I would say D, all of the above. start with the script. We had two sort of crowd scenes in our one sort of a music festival and one just another kind of crowd scene that we changed completely, made them sort of small, intimate moments instead. We then, our budget definitely went up. One of the things that was it was fortunate for us was that we were somewhat quarantining already because we were out in northern Minnesota. We were gonna have to take our crew out of the Twin Cities up there. And, we had planned on taking over this resort and putting most people up anyway, but not everybody. And we were gonna have some local PAs, local crafty, local catering, those sorts of things. And we had to change that and put all of those people in our bubble. So we had to bring them up and put them in our sort of quarantine bubble. And then of course the testing was not inexpensive at all. We had, what do we have? 4 weeks of prep, 3 to 4 weeks of shoot. And I think at the end of the day, we spent, over $50,000 just in testing alone. And I think for our overall budget, it was probably about 15% of our budget extra that we had to add on, which as anybody on this call knows, it's frustrating because it's not going on the screen, but it's going to make the screen safe, I guess. So, it's what you do.
Yep. And then like on ours, Red 48. So the movie was originally called Black Friday because it was going to actually take place on Black Friday. And as which I mean would be hundreds and hundreds of extras. And so when the pandemic started, we didn't know what was all going to end up happening, but as the pandemic started, we decided to move it off of Black Friday so that we could reduce the count, reduce the number of people. And then of course, everything got delayed with all the stay-at-home orders. So when we started back up, the big change we wanted to do, obviously to try to keep the numbers small, is we even then changed the storyline so that the hostage takers take the store hostage before it actually opens. So it's just employees inside of the store. So that allowed us to go from, hundreds of extras to what I think it was originally. Then we changed it to like 75 background. And then it reduced itself all the way down to like our principals and then 15 background employees, so that we were able to keep it much smaller inside the store and be able to, even on screen in a way, I mean, unless the scene called for it, it would allow us to socially distance people, the actors, a lot better while we were on set. And then same thing, there were a lot of, 80% of the movie takes place inside the store, but the other 20%, we had a lot of locations, and we were even planning on originally doing like, a company move a day, 1 location, 2 locations. And we didn't even want to kind of have to deal with all of that just because of the trucks and putting everybody in trucks and vehicles and moving them. So we got creative with the script, and a lot of indoor scenes became exterior outdoor scenes. And we found places, 360 degrees around the store, using neighboring residential neighborhood and stuff to where we could reset some of these locations right around the store location. And so we only had to do 1 move throughout the whole shoot, and we just got creative, just trying to keep everybody safe and keeping everything contained in the bubble. And then, same thing with COVID costs. I mean, I think ours ended up, our costs ended up being about 85,000 total. Between tests and COVID compliance officer and health and safety manager and such.
If anybody else wants to interject, feel free.
On ours, we were pretty lucky because we had already shot all of our kissing scenes, our fighting scenes, and our dancing scenes. Not that it's a musical, but you got to have dancing scenes. And because it's a low budget movie, we never had crowd scenes, but also because of the storyline, we never had crowd scenes, so we didn't have to resort to blow up dolls or CGI extras or anything like that. So we didn't have to change the script too much. One thing we had to do, because we were trying to get the New York State tax credit, we had to shoot 1 day on a stage, and that would have been in Brooklyn. But we told the New York State folks, hey, we don't want to be traveling back and forth. So they actually helped us find a location. It was actually an American Legion skating rink in Greenport, like a mile away from where we were all staying, which was also at a sequestered resort. And so we turned that into kind of an office location and made it applicable for the New York State, requirements. But otherwise, we didn't really have to do too much rewriting. A little bit of like, oh, instead of handing this to that person, just pull it up, or things like that, but nothing too much. So we were lucky that regard. And yeah, it was probably about testing and everything was probably about 20% of our budget for this 4-day shoot. So it's a lot. I mean, the COVID testing itself was probably $10,000, and that was just for 2 rounds of tests. So I can only imagine the rest of you guys doing it for your whole shoot. But also we have the challenge of we had to get individual COVID safe car services, which I guess is a thing, which were, to bring each actor individually, the 3 hours from New York. That was probably the biggest challenge, and kind of unexpected cost was just like, you couldn't carpool people, because even after you've taken the test, well, what happens if, the test didn't, they got exposed the night before the test, and then what happens if they get exposed later? So, so treating everyone individually in transpo costs was a lot.
So Amy, did the scripts that you initially signed on for change considerably between reading them and?
Yeah, I was going to mention that in both cases for both films, absolutely there were kind of minor, small characters, day player kind of things that just kind of completely disappeared or were combined. It was about it felt like it was about making the cast size as small as possible. And also, yes, in They, Them, Us, we had a scene that was going to be shot at the Ohio State Fair. I guess they had, Ohio has a really good film, film incentives, and they wanted us to shoot there, but then, that got canceled. So we changed it to, we shot inside a go-kart play. It was like a family day, but then we had 2 background actors, basically that was it. So yeah, there was a lot of creative rewrites on this project as well. And I was going to speak to what Dan had mentioned about getting actors to set safely, because for me, normally going to Columbus from New York, I would have flown. But this was in, we were maybe negotiating in May, June, and I was like, I don't want to get on a plane. So they rented me a car in New York, and I drove myself, and then I kept that car throughout production, because I was like, let me just limit my exposure. I don't need a PA picking me up or transpo or whatever. So, there's just kind of been a different way of thinking about my approach to how I want to get to work. I did fly to Missouri. I was going to say Minnesota. I did fly to Missouri because it's a little farther, and it felt safe, I guess. I mean, I've been negative the whole time, so I'm taking out my stunt pads. I realized I still had them on. Sorry, I literally walked off getting dragged.
So you're looking taller than you.
We call these chicken cutlets. They can work here or on your hips. So there's a very good stunt coordinator on this, which makes me feel good because a lot happens.
That's hysterical. I love that. So. Yeah. All right. So how did you guys, so there's this new COVID compliance officer position, right? That has been sort of dictated by the industry. So how did you guys go about finding this person and how did that work out?
So we found ours. He was trained his normal day job as a DGA second AD, this guy named Aaron Aldridge. And, but he had done the compliance, training and everything. And he was great. We all trusted him and put our complete, trust in him. And I think because he had DGA training, he knew production, he was familiar with it. And people kind of trusted him in that way. So, I think it worked out pretty smoothly with us. I mean, there were definitely times when, I had to catch myself to if I wanted to yell at someone for not wearing a mask, I was like, you know what? It's probably better if I get Aaron to yell at them. Just the dynamics are different. But likewise, he would yell at me if I was getting too close to someone. And I was like, it's frustrating, but that's why we're paying him. That's why he's there, So, so I think for us, it worked out pretty smoothly.
Okay.
Yeah, and for us, our line producer had actually decided early on to do the compliance training just because she wanted to understand everything and have all of that knowledge. And once we kind of started up and started gearing up for prep, she was actually able to reach back out to where she did the compliance training and find out who else who also completed the compliance training that was in our area, and they were able to provide her a list of people, and who we ended up hiring was same thing. And I think it was kind of important to do that, is the person we hired had been she'd been a UPM for many years, and so she was familiar with production. She understood how production runs. And so we hired her because she was local to the area that we were filming in. But I know a lot of the compliance training places now are providing the information so that you can track down and contact, people who've got the training in person. And I think that hiring somebody with production experience is important, so they understand what it is that they're actually dealing with, beyond just the COVID, and how to implement COVID properly to a production, rather than a person who has no set experience.
We've got the exact kind of opposite of that, and Billy, it's someone with, I don't think, any set experience, but it's working out great because he's a young guy. I think he's the brother of the DP. It's kind of one of those movies. Everybody's very young. It's a good group. Wait, this is falling. But our COVID compliance officer is a former Marine. He was a medic in the Marines, so we've got that little bonus. And then he did the COVID compliance test, or course, or whatever it is. And he's also a gun expert. So, and we have a lot of guns on the show. We have somebody dealing with that, but it's nice to have another person who is, knows all about that stuff. Very, very comes around once an hour with the Purell. Literally has the shield for me the second we cut. It's right in front of my face. He's on it. So even though it's probably wise to have somebody who understands, the drill on set, for us, it's been working out with a different approach.
Interesting.
Ours also has production experience, but as a medic, former firefighter, but been a set medic for many years. Also took, 2 or 3 of the training programs, and was around, handing out sanitizers, taking temperatures twice a day, and doing the normal stuff.
Mm-hmm. So what was the testing regime, and how did you guys find labs, and how did that work?
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I mean, we did ours starting, we started to try to need tests at the end of July, very end of July, early August. And, the testing capacity and capability in this country leaves a lot to be desired still. And so we struggled finding a partner to help us in northern Minnesota. We only had 2 choices. One of them was not helpful. I guess I'll just say that. The other one was helpful, but it wasn't cheap. And, you have to make it work. Unfortunately for us, they didn't come to set. We had to go to them. So we had to plan that in our schedule every day for everybody. But they were PCR tests during pre-production. We don't have zone A's and zone B. So we pretty much tested everybody once a week. And remember, we were quarantined, so nobody was really leaving. That was part of our protocols, was, nobody can go anywhere. Even on the weekends and stuff, we had runners to go to the stores. We had, you had to do contactless grocery shopping, all of that kind of stuff. So, so we tested once a week. And then of course, when we had 2 of our actors come for a full last week of prep for rehearsals. And then we started for zone A's, which was a good portion of our crew. We did 3 times a week. And then the zone B still stayed 1 time a week.
Yeah, and we started, it took a long time to kind of figure all of that out. We spent a lot of time in soft prep, as we knew we were gearing up, trying to actually find clinics. We were shooting in New Jersey, and so it was a matter of finding clinics that could then work with us within a reasonable budget. I mean, it's expensive, but trying to find a reasonable number for the testing costs, and then finding a clinic, at least at that point, they could also do quick turnarounds on the tests. So we probably spent 3 weeks calling every clinic we could find, and eventually whittling it down. And we got lucky. We ended up finding a clinic only 10 minutes from our primary location that worked within our budget. They were doing testing, nasal swab testing, but turning around the results in 24 hours. So we would be able to, and they ended up being able to do it faster. So if we could get somebody tested in the morning, we actually had our results back in the middle of the night. So we would know. So like for actors that were coming in, we got really lucky with them. And then they were coming out. So during prep, everybody would go to the clinic to get tested. And then during filming, they came out, they have an RV, they've got 2 or 3 RVs because they do a lot of off-site testing. So they were able to come out and do testing on site 3 times a week. And then if we had somebody that, you know, we would do testing Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with everybody and the background and actors that were about to start. We'd have them come out obviously in the 24 hours. And then they were available from 6 in the morning till 9 at night. So if we had 2 actors that flew in, and we were able to kind of land them at Newark at like 4 and race them straight over to the clinic to get tested and have the results back by the next morning so they could go into wardrobe and start getting fitted and such. So, but it took a lot of footwork to try to find places that they could do a quick turnaround and also be reasonable on budget.
Yeah, and on ours, we, you know, our friends at SAG had told us to just Google hospitals in New York. So I did, and luckily the 3rd hospital I Googled was Mount Sinai, and I caught the right person at the right time, and she was great. And so we had well, about 2/3 of our cast and crew who were based in New York did their first round of testing at Mount Sinai, and we got their results in 24 hours. And then the rest of us that were out in Greenport already on the tip of Long Island, we worked with the local hospital there. Now they had told us it was going to be 24 hours. And, but then when we got there, they're like, yeah, 1 or 2 days. We're like, well, hang on a second. That's a big difference for us. So that was, you know, most people got their results back in 24 hours. Some people were a little bit longer. And that was a little unnerving, just sort of not knowing when those results were going to come back. So that caused a little bit of delays in how things work. But yeah, it's not cheap, but we were able to find them, so it can be done.
I can add a little something different about the testing angle. On both of these features, the one I'm doing now and in Ohio, we were such a tight group that everybody was zone A. Now, I'm sure in pre-production it was different, but while we were in production, the whole team was 3 times a week testing. But they did something a little bit different than what we're doing here in Missouri. We had traditional Monday to Friday shoot weeks, and on Monday we would do the finger prick test. That's like immediate. You put it in the little thingy, and it's like an immediate result. And the COVID person explained to me there that that test is slightly less accurate than the PCR test, but can detect the virus in the blood earlier. So their thinking was that in Ohio, bars were still open, restaurant was still open when we got there. They were worried that possibly someone would go over the weekend and do a little crazy stuff. So Monday they did the blood prick. And then Wednesday and Friday, we would do the nasal PCR swab. That was like just kind of their way to try to figure it out. Not that, and I mean, again, we had no positives, so it was great, but it was just an interesting approach.
And did you guys have like a protocol for what if somebody came up positive? Like what's the plan?
We were shutting down, I think. I mean, I didn't, yeah. Like on the last night when we wrapped and we were in the big backyard at the director's house and everybody, you know, ripped their masks off and we were having a couple drinks because we were done. And we were like, we did it. The producer told me that he's like, I can't believe we got through it. I thought we were going to get shut down after 2 weeks. Just, you know, with all, it's just, we're kind of reinventing the wheel. So, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, that was, Michael, for us, that was a big part of it. I mean, luckily it was only a 4-day shoot, but we really thought about like all the redundancies and backup plans. And so, you know, and especially because we weren't sure when tests were going to come back. So it wasn't so much if someone was positive, but it's more like, oh, okay, just if their test is delayed a day. So for the crew, it was, you know, our backup for our cinematographer was our first AC. For me as a director, the backup was the first AD. I was the backup sound mixer. You know, I would have boomed if our sound person had gone down. And then even with the cast, we had contingency plans. We were like, all right, if our lead actress, if she can't work, then we're shooting her scenes as a POV, and we don't even need her. You know, or if it.
Dan, can I interrupt? Because if the DP was positive, wouldn't the first AC, they're working, you know, 2 inches away from each other?
That was.
Did they have to both quarantine, kind of?
Yeah, it's a good question. on our first day, like 2/3 of the crew were coming from New York City and 1/3 were in Greenport. So the DP was in Greenport and the first AC was in New York. So if one had gone, if the testing had been delayed for one, then the other could do it. So that.
Oh, I see.
It's a shorter shoot that he was on. They were on what did you say, a 5-day shoot?
Right. It was just 4 days. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so things like that, but also then the gaffer was the backup too. So we had like extra layers of redundancy, and I think that's key. Like on all these shoots, is just make sure there's no one person who's the only person who knows how to use some important piece of equipment, whatever it is. But even with supporting roles, we were like, okay, well, if this person can't do it, then we'll just give the lines to someone else. If that actor can't do it, we'll make a crew an actor. Things. We thought about all these things, and I think just the act of thinking about it just made us feel more secure.
Yeah, and I think for us, we were, we obviously spent a lot of time with that, and with as far as crew goes, the preparation was that if somebody tested positive, they immediately quarantined, and then those we were kind of following, because we had talked with SAG a lot about how to kind of deal with some of this. And if a person had tested positive, they would immediately quarantine. And then for themselves, what we wanted to also make sure was, what if, because there's always the risk of false positives. And so the plan was that if somebody tested positive, they immediately quarantine. Then in working with SAG, they'd immediately go get tested twice. And just to double check, if both came back negative, then obviously it was a false positive. But then anybody who had been working immediately with them in close contact, within 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes, all of those sort of things, those people would also immediately quarantine, and we'd immediately test all of those people. So that was sort of the original plan that we went into with, if anybody tested positive. As far as the crew goes, and the same thing, we had backups. We had people on standby. We were checking people's availability constantly. We had crew members that could step up into other positions as well. So we kind of set that up. For us, as far as the lead cast goes, the story was dependent, and honestly, the financing was dependent upon them. So if our lead cast had tested positive, we were prepared for the potential shutting down for 2 weeks, of having to shut down for 2 weeks and restart and double check the false positive and such. Supporting cast was a little bit easier, and then background would have been obviously even easier to kind of maneuver things around, possibly change up storyline and stuff. But when it came to the leads, we were prepared to have to shut down for 2 weeks if somebody had tested positive.
Yeah, I mean, ours was similar to all these, and the only thing slightly different, similar, but is that we had arranged there were a few rapid tests from our the hospital partner that we work with, and so if we had a positive test, we could take that person over and get a very good nasal PCR rapid test that they would turn around very quickly for us. So but very similar things in terms of quarantining people who were close, and figuring out who would we shut down for. We also said we could potentially do some Zoom with our director or Zooming with our cinematographer, if those could work with like the first AC or whatever, to sort of fill in that way and perform, that way if they're feeling well. It was interesting for us. We had a funny test. We didn't know we were going to have it, but on our last day of prep, our DP wound up she was ill and was throwing up, and we made her go home immediately, and we were all a little bit nervous about that, obviously. We then arranged to get a test, and we had to wait, like 24 hours or whatever, 40 hours, to get some of the results. And she felt fine the next day and very much thought it was a migraine, because she does get those sometimes. But it was a good test for the crew to see that even the DP was not going to work on the first day of shooting if we didn't get the test results and if it wasn't negative. So I think it reinforced for everybody that this is serious and we're taking it seriously. And, please respect all your quarantine boundaries, because that's what's really going to protect us the most.
So how did you guys, did your productions deal with the insurance issue? Because that seems to be a sticking issue across the boards for the entire industry, except for the big guys.
So
I mean, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
We bit the bullet. I mean, we just had to kind of, obviously there was no insurance. There was no insurance that was going to cover, anything related to COVID. And so we as a production company made the decision of, we're just going to, if something happens and we have to shut down and restart and things like that, we're going to have to pony up and kind of cover those costs. So we made the risk, we took the risk of doing the production without any coverage on something like that.
Yeah, that's good to hear, John. I actually just wrote a piece for an article for Variety, which will be out in a few weeks, about that. And the interesting thing I was finding was that, the big budget, the Warner Brothers, the Batman, the Netflix series, they can essentially self-insure. They have enough money to ride these things out. But the folks like us, like John just said, we just kind of figure it into our own schedules and our own budgets, and we're like, well, we're not getting insurance anyway. But honestly, we weren't getting cast insurance even without COVID or any kind of pandemic coverage anyway. What's interesting is I think it's really affecting the like $1 to $10 million films that are relying on the model of foreign sales and bank financing and bonds, and those all require cast insurance and require that if you don't get this one particular actor, then you're completely not financed. And I think those kinds of films are having a really intractable time doing it. I think the good thing is, and it's nice to hear from all of you, is that all of us are able to figure out enough redundancy plans and backups that we can figure it out in a way that the bigger indies really can't.
I would agree with that 100%. I think that because bonding goes along with banking, and you can't get a bond without the insurance for COVID. We had cast insurance, we had regular cast insurance that we would always have. We had everything we would always have for insurance on this movie. Obviously, we didn't have COVID insurance, and nobody will until the federal government backs it, the insurers to cover them. But and so because of that, we didn't have any traditional financing. So any movie that either doesn't have a deep pocket, like Dan said, for a studio, or one person who's like, yep, or one financier who really feels that they can, bear that risk, or they're a small enough budget where if they shut down, it's not, a mint, then I think you can go forward. I think that I would up it just a little bit, Dan. I would say more in the sort of 2 to 10, I think is really struggling, because when you start to get into the 2, plus you're going to start to get into some more debt financing, some more traditional bank financing, and you're not going to get them without a bond. You can't get a bond without the cast insurance for COVID.
Well, and we kind of had to deal with that on this one as well, with the debt financing, and such. And so we actually, particularly for the leads, we had to do guarantees, that we were going to actually, if we had to shut down because because I, as a director, or the leads that were essential elements, if any of us got sick, we had to do a personal guarantee from the company to cover the shutdown costs and the restart costs, to ensure that the movie got done. So we were in a way having to guarantee ourselves as if we were a bond company bonding our own movie.
Yep.
Interesting. So did let's talk about the creative process a little bit and how this affected it. I mean, obviously we've already talked a little bit about script, but I imagine it's probably a lot harder to have the moment of inspiration where you say, no, let's go over here and, or let's change this up, and all of a sudden, in the moment, and even, working with your actors working with each other, the kind of is there a real loss of intimacy in that? How do we think did it make your films less, I don't want to say less creative, but maybe, I mean, how do you guys think about that?
I feel like from an acting standpoint, we all saw how, like, on Bold and the Beautiful or whatever they were using, you know, a sex doll for like love scenes, and just that on They Them Us, we did have some love scenes, and we just did them like a traditional love scene. I mean, because once you're in the bubble and once you're being tested 3 times a week and masking and not going out and mixing it up, we actually felt quite safe once we were really, you know, in it. And also like with the crew, we understood that like we were trusting each other. It was maybe a team of 35 and we were just all there together. Mm-hmm. So for me as an actor, is it strange to wear one of those shields and block and rehearse and do all of that and then pull it off and shoot? Yeah, that's strange. But ultimately, you know, when the camera rolls, it's still just like old times, except everybody else is wearing a mask. But
I mean, I think no, go ahead.
I would say I would agree. Ours was very, very similar. I do think the bubble and the 3 times a week, it's, as much as I hated it for a cost thing, I loved it for a work and comfort factor. I think that everybody did. You feel good. You're not letting your guard down, and particularly in a bubble, because you're not going anywhere anyway. But I think that it allows you to be fairly normal. Yes, you're all wearing masks and you are staying distant more. You're certainly putting a lot of sanitizer on your hands, and things are being wiped down, which never happened before. You're limiting people on a, you know, inside sets, definitely, for sure. Things are taking a little longer, but otherwise it felt fairly normal, which felt good.
Yeah, I completely agree with Laura. I mean, it was the same way. I mean, we felt we were being tested so much, and with, you know, the protocols and what everybody was doing, everybody felt very comfortable, very safe. I kind of joked a lot of times I felt safer being on set than I did stopping at the gas station to put gas in my car, you know. Yeah. And so I think, and everybody sort of felt that way. So I don't think it inhibited any of the creative. I mean, other than how we adjusted the script a little bit to bring background down, you know, we never felt inhibited. And I think it was actually interesting. The one thing that kind of came up was there was a scene where 2 of the actors were supposed to kiss. And I was, in the back of my head, it was deep in the schedule, but I was prepared to just, you know, to change that. It was, you know, it wasn't necessary. And both the actors came to me that morning and said, listen, we still want to kiss. And the SAG rep was actually out on site that day, and they had actually already gone out to the SAG rep and said, listen, we got tested, you know, yesterday, we're still negative, we want to do it. And it was like, okay, it's up to you two. And so, yeah, I never felt inhibited, you know, or held back creatively.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing I found was that the sound level made things strange. Like, you, as a director, normally, for example, you know, you want to go whisper something subtle to an actor, like, you know, more or less, louder, quieter.
Do it better.
Yeah.
Never.
And allowed to whisper people. So you wind up like yelling direction across the room so everyone can hear, the other actors, the whole crew can hear. And, you know, and likewise, if during a take, you can't just whisper to the cinematographer, oh, pan left, pan right, or, you know, things like that. Or if the script supervisor couldn't just whisper to me, oh, the boom's in the shot, and I would whisper back, no, that's fine, we're going to zoom in. So instead you get people yelling, boom in the shot, you know, or have we started rolling yet? It's like, yes, we've started rolling, you know. And so you lose a lot of the kind of normal intimacy that you have that naturally protects people's egos and keeps things relatively stress-free by whispering. So instead, everyone is yelling all the time. And, you know, and you've got ventilation fans going between takes, and everyone's wearing a mask and a face shield. And these shields, you know, someone whispers something behind you and you think they're in front of you. So it's sort of, it encourages paranoia that you normally have a little bit less of as a director, but instead you think everyone's talking about you and whispering right in your head.
Well, they are.
There were those kind of dynamics that definitely were different and changed that I noticed.
Yeah, I can imagine not enjoying it as much. I mean, how did you feel about it? I mean, did you feel that it was generally just the same, or a little more tense, a little less fun, a little more, you know, was it just was it was like, you know, I mean, we're not, none of us are really doing these little tiny films to get rich. We usually do them because we love doing them. So what was the level of like joy on your sets?
It was definitely more tense, and but I think our actors all had a great time. I think they were having a blast. But for me, also because and probably like you, John, you know, as a director and producer, we've got all these other layers of, you know, extra layers of, okay, well, who is this person going to test positive tomorrow, and what's our backup plan for that? Like, you know, you don't want all those extra layers of stress, but you have to have them. So
yeah, and I think definitely walking into it with a particular mentality. I mean, I think that's important, how you kind of walk into it and how you treat it, and you know, how you set the stage with everybody that's around you and such. And I mean, you know, you're absolutely right. We definitely, you know, having all those COVID things in the back of your head is an additional pressure. But at the same time, I also found, you know, in a way, a different level of camaraderie, because we were all in it together. And so, you know, I found, yeah, the entire crew and the entire cast, you know, bonding and coming together in a positive way, much more than I've seen on some other sets. I mean, I've definitely seen that before, but you know, it was one for all for one and one for all type of scenario. And so I thought that was really cool. And that was really kind of fun in how everybody came together. That I think the one thing that everybody joked about that stuck out to us the most was lunch, where, you know, instead of 7-8 people crowded at a 6-foot table, you got one person at either end of a 6-foot table. Suddenly you feel like the new kid in middle school that nobody wants to talk to, you know, and that was kind of strange. But yeah, I think definitely people's mentality and attitude has a lot to do with it to bring everybody together.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with that. I mean, I think it did, you know, other than somewhat bitching about the mask every day, just because it's like you're wearing a mask every day for 12, 13 hours a day, and you really do want to rip the damn thing off after a while. But other than that, I think it was great. And I will say that I heard from numerous crew people that it was probably the best production they'd ever been on. So I think that there is a big camaraderie factor, and there is you know, we're all in this a little bit more than normal. And also I think that people are really happy to be working. There's a lot of people that aren't working. There's you know, even in our own industry, there's a ton of films that aren't being made right now, and TV's kicking back up. But, you know, I think people are really happy to be working, and if they're feeling safe, even better, of course. And so I think that it was a really wonderful place to be.
Now let's talk a bit about how's COVID affecting or not affecting post-production?
Yeah, post-production's that's been different. You know, I mean, for us, we actually had 2 movies in post-production as COVID started, and then and so we had to kind of figure out how to deal with all of that. I mean, it's all long distance. I mean, for us right now, we're still kind of doing everything remotely. So for the director, you know, for the directors, myself included on this most recent one, you know, we're editing remotely. So my editor's in one place and I'm in another, and we're bouncing files back and forth, and we're sharing computer screens and working that way. Sound mixes, we'll see where things are at in the springtime with this one, but like the other 2 that were like deep, you know, we were hitting sound mix, you know, and color grading in July you know, it's a height of all of the stay-at-home orders and everything. And so we were buying you know, monitors from Best Buy and shipping them to the director and the DP, and then calibrating them and sharing color files. And sound design, we were buying little 5.1 home systems for the directors to set up at their house, and then the sound house was shipping them files so they could listen to it. So everything was being done remotely, and I think there was a lot of resistance to it at the beginning. I think everybody, myself included, kind of has gotten used to it. You know, I was just talking with my editor yesterday, and I'm like, this is absolutely weird that, you know, I'm almost done with the director's cut and I have yet to actually sit in the same room with you. And like, this is, you know, there is a level of frustration, but what can you do? So you just have to make peace with it and find a way around it and get comfortable working that way for now.
Yeah.
You know, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say ours is a little different actually. And I mean, normally we would have an edit room, you know, at Final Frame or whatever, and here in New York, and we ultimately didn't do that. Our editor is working out of his house, which is actually on Long Island. And what we did is our director, who's normally from Los Angeles, has family in New York. And so he went and quarantined with them for 2 weeks. And then he has joined the editor in his house. His editor has a room, an extra room. And so they are together every day, and sort of created like a new family while they're doing that, you know, with the editor, his wife, and our director. And that's worked well. You know, obviously, there's not tons of people coming and visiting the edit room or anything like that, as there would be a little bit more of before. And obviously we have to figure out sound and color. We're not intending to do it completely remote. Like John just mentioned, we're intending to do some in person, but there's definitely more remote aspects of it than we would have ever done in the past.
Yeah. And in my case, I didn't mention this before, but I live in LA. I'm based here. So when we wrapped in March and had to take our pandemic pause, I just grabbed one of the hard drives and took it home with me. And I've been doing the editing myself. You know, there is no other editor. So, you know, and luckily I know how to edit. Normally I do at least additional editing on my other films. This time I'm like, well, it's me, you know? So, so yeah, it's on the same computer. I'm just still cutting away myself. But yeah, we're gonna, well, assuming we raise more money for post, which we still need to do. Yeah, we'll be heading into sound and things like that. It's been nice. I've been able to work with my composer. He has a studio that we did one session over the summer with a vocalist in LA, and it was great because she could be isolated in one booth behind glass. He was in another booth behind glass. I showed up just at the very end just to film some of it. You know, we all had masks, and it was like, oh wow, this can be done. And it was, as musicians, they were like, wow, this is fun. This is the first time they'd been in a studio, but it was as safe as anything. So you know, there are ways to do it. And John, I may call on you to find out kind of all these different remote ways.
Sure.
Be jumping into that pretty soon.
So Amy, have you done any ADR for the film that you wrapped earlier?
You know, I haven't, but I am, one of my side hustles is I've been quite fortunate to work in voiceovers a lot. So I don't have like the best quality home studio, but I have complete capability of like plug and play. I have a little closet. So I've been doing voiceover auditions from home for years. And I also have I have a mic that I travel with, a tiny one. So I'm ready. I can do ADR wherever I am. I mean, I'm not sure if it'll be like the perfect quality, but I think for like a rough cut, it would totally work. So I haven't done it yet, but I'm ready.
And that's actually that we over the summer we had, because ours is all about the Nixon tapes. It's a thriller/dark comedy, and so we had 3 actors, Bruce Campbell, John Cryer, and Ted Raimi, and we just had them do, you know, we had Zoom sessions, but then they each had their own individual mics, and we did that whole thing over the summer, which was probably wound up being cheaper and easier than if we had done it normally in post-production. So
was the quality usable for you?
Yeah, totally, because it's supposed to be on degraded tapes anyway.
Oh, perfect.
All had really, you know, they all had decent mics, and you know, we worked on that, and then the Zoom sessions were just kind of to sync it up, so they could see each other. But for us, it worked perfectly and was much cheaper and easier than if we'd done it otherwise.
Cool. So are there any of the COVID mitigation kind of rules or standards, now that you guys have worked on them, that you think either aren't working or could be better? Or
I think the thing that was most frustrating for me, and I don't have an answer to it, but I also feel one of the things I would love, you know, SAG to understand a little bit more, not that they weren't. And by the way, this would be any union, any of them, and any partner that you're working with, is like all of us in this country are at the mercy of the testing capabilities of the country itself. And so, like, for example, when we were starting to talk to people in July, I mean, people were waiting 5 days for test results. And I didn't know. I mean, like, I can't force them to say, well, SAG is requiring me to get these within 24 to 48 hours. Like, you got to pick up your game. Like, there's nothing I can do. I mean, they're being sent to the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is a very good, reputable, hospital clinic, but I can't rush them. I can't do anything about it. And so that was a little bit of like, well, you got to get in 24 to 40 hours. And it was like, well, how, please help me. I'm more than happy, because you don't accept the finger prick test. They're only the PCR nasal test. So like the hand prick test or the saliva test, obviously those are much easier to do because there's different standards or whatever. But if you have to send them the PCR test to these private labs or even government labs, you're at their mercy. And so that was a little bit frustrating. Luckily for us, and for, sounds like everybody, the capabilities have picked up. But if we're going into something this winter, they may slow down again. And I don't know, like I said, I don't have an answer other than what's frustrating for me as a producer is like, well, this just has to happen. And it's like, well, I would love to make that happen. Help me make that happen. And I would love to figure that out. So that was one thing that I don't know. It shouldn't be changed. I do think the 3 times a week is very comforting for everybody. And it gives you such a sense of being able to work. But there is that, struggle.
Yeah, and I think just a practical thing that SAG could maybe try to do is when we do find these labs that are amenable to this, like keep a list so that other producers and other directors can like access and go, oh wow, I don't have to Google labs or hospitals. I can just call Mount Sinai. Like I have the number of the person to call. I'm happy to share it with people, but nobody else knows that I have that number. And I think that, and even if you're shooting in Minnesota or Missouri or wherever, great. Let's get a database going of, okay, where are the 24-hour labs available that will work with films? Yeah. And they're out there in every state, probably, but nobody knows it.
Before I flew to Missouri, I guess it's a kind of a newer SAG rule that before you're going to fly to location, you have to be tested within 48 hours of getting on the plane. So I was talking to our producer here about that. And he's like, you want us to say, we'll see if we can find you a test. And I said, you know what? And I reached out to our COVID testing whisperer that we worked with in Ohio, who was this amazing woman who just was able to figure it out. I was like, Victoria, can you help me out with this? She goes, I'll send you. So she FedExed me a test. I did it at home. FedEx to Texas, and I had the results Saturday morning before I got on the plane. But like it's that kind of like workaround and hustle that's like not really possible. Like there needs to be some sort of like unified process and system and list, so SAG, I mean, it would help if it came from the top, and I mean the top of our country, but maybe SAG could work towards that. That would, I think, be really helpful for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting. Assuming this pandemic does end someday soon, is there anything from your experiences so far that you see as silver linings, or maybe, practices that you might, or that we might change going forward out of this, that we've learned out of this?
I think for me, it's not necessarily related directly to SAG or whatever, but I do think, in the past, at least for our industry, which is very relationship driven and sort of face-to-face direct relationship driven, there was oftentimes many things that couldn't happen if the director didn't sit down with the actor, or if you didn't sit down with somebody else, or, all these kind of things that would wait for people to be in the same place having a meeting, and could inevitably delay things for quite some time before that would happen. And I think we've come into a world where we're also used to Zoom, that it feels good. I mean, and you can have a very productive meeting on a Zoom now. And I think everybody sees that and feels that. And a lot of things can be done that way that can potentially move things along a little faster. So we're not just waiting for all these things to happen. And, I think even doing traditional sales cycle, you used to have so much expense to fly your talent into Cannes and do this presentation for the buyers. And I can tell you now that can easily happen on Zoom, and be much cheaper and much faster. And, just there's lots of things I think that can happen that way now.
And I would just say, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the one thing the pandemic has taught us is that, you know, filmed entertainment, whether it's TV or films, is kind of the one, you know, performing arts that has been able to thrive, you know, or still work. You know, people are stuck at home. You know, theater obviously is having a hard time, and opera and symphony and even museums. But you know, people are still watching movies, and more than ever. You know, it would be nice if the Netflix's and Amazon's actually bought some of our movies, but you know, in it instead of just developing their own stuff. But in general, I think that's been good. And if there is a backlog of these $1 or $2 million to $10 million films, but meanwhile we have all these nice little indies that are available, that may give us all a chance for our films to get out there in a little bit less cluttered environment, you know, in the next 6 to 9 months. We'll see.
Yeah, I was just, and I mean, I kind of agree also. I think if nothing else, you know, things such as Zoom and what that's done for communication and being able to accomplish things a little bit faster and talk to people a little bit more often and see them instead of just being on a phone. I've really enjoyed that, and I really like that. I like that. So I hope that continues. There is a part of me that obviously misses some of the human contact, the human interaction, you know, with my actors, with the production designer, with the, you know, the DOP and stuff. And that's, you know, I mean, obviously it still all gets accomplished and Zoom works just fine, you know, for scenarios like that. But I hope it doesn't become, I hope something like a Zoom becomes a tool to help us, you know, communicate faster, especially when we're spread out and be able to see each other. But I hope we don't then forego the human interaction of what this industry is also a little bit about at the same time. So I do miss that, and hope that we find the right balance between the two, because I really do love being able to do something like this, you know, but at the same time, I'd love to be sitting in a room together talking about it also.
Yeah. You also, you can't take the, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I never thought I would do a chemistry read over Zoom, but we did that for They, Them, Us. And you know what? It worked. It worked. You know, so.
We did that as well. It worked. It was weird. And I would prefer that. I would prefer that returns to the old way of doing it in a room together.
Until you show up and somebody's way shorter than you thought they were.
Yeah.
And you know, Dan, you can't do a hot tub party, you know, on Zoom. So
you could electrocute yourself if everyone's got their laptop.
Right, because you know, Slam Dance has a classic hot tub party every year. So
Summit. It's
the Summit. Sorry, it's the Summit. Hot tub Summit. I forgot.
Yeah.
So, okay, to wrap this up, what's next for everybody? I mean, we've heard a little bit about that, but just let's just let us know what your next steps are in your projects and what's coming up.
I'll go first.
Sure.
Well, I'm finishing up in Missouri on this feature tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Then I fly home to New York, and I guess I'm quarantining for 2 weeks. I think that's a thing now, so that's a little bit rough. And then I've got a couple of things in the can. I do have an indie feature that first premiered in the the first indie episodic section at Sundance, I think 2 years ago. We were in that as a pilot called Paint. Didn't get picked up. We went back and turned it into a feature, and that's being released on Gravitas December 15th. So on one of our little small indie platforms, which is very nice.
Cool. Great. Cool. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm working on a film that I'm hoping to shoot, you know, next early, you know, spring-ish, I guess I would say. It would also be sort of a quarantine bubble type of film. Bring everybody up to northern Georgia and has some rafting, whitewater rafting parts of it, which is what I'm trying to figure out at the moment. How to do that on a tightish budget and safe. But it's interesting. I do think one of the things that I would hesitate to do right now is a non-quarantine bubble film, because the bubble plus testing is what I think made me feel super comfortable, and I think the rest of the crew. And so those shoots now where everybody goes home at night to their family, I'm sure they're trying to be responsible, and I'm sure they're doing everything they can, but you also can't control their families, and you know, kids and friends come over, and it's just, to me, that would be the scariest part. So I'm excited to do something that's maybe another quarantine bubble again. Not that I normally love those things because I miss my family, but they work for now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think, like I said earlier, I'm leaving in 2 weeks to start prepping on one movie on the East Coast while we're also prepping another movie down in Puerto Rico, and we're doing post on a handful of different movies, so kind of just continuing to juggle all of those. And I know, kind of like to that point, even like the 2 movies that we're getting ready to start up, these weren't the 2 movies we were originally planning on trying to get into production right now. We stepped back and looked through the projects and selected scripts that allowed for smaller cast, less background, less locations, easier to quarantine and bubble and socially distance on. So, we selected 2 projects that made more sense for the world that we're living in right now, and kind of paying attention to that, even for projects that we're looking forward to for the springtime. So I think in a lot of ways, at least in the indie world, I think it's going to be smaller scope productions, perhaps, to be able to better manage the COVID protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, John, keep me in mind for that Puerto Rico feature. Thanks.
Absolutely. I'll give you a call.
Can you drive there?
Change of pace after Missouri and Columbus, Ohio. I'm ready for.
Exactly. Yeah. Midwest to tropics. Nice.
Please.
Especially in the winter.
I'm still finishing this movie. We've still got a little bit of editing to go, and then into post-production. And we still need to raise money for it. So if anyone wants to give us money to finish making 18 and a half, let me know. And so I'm second option of my book, so I'm on deadline. And making sourdough every day. Yeah, that was the other thing. That was a nice advantage, is I brought my sourdough starter from LA out to New York and baked sourdough buns and cinnamon rolls for our cast and crew every day. So hopefully that stays with us into pandemic environment.
And that's another thing we can't get from you over Zoom. So
exactly.
Yes.
Can't smell the bread,
No, I can try, but it ain't gonna work. Well, thanks for spending the time, you guys. We really appreciate it. Stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep making stuff, and keep in touch.